All right, good evening, everyone. So just to get started, if everyone wants to go ahead and put in the chat box or the chat box for now, and even fill out that poll just to let us know who you are, what describes you. Are you a coach, athletic trainer, dietitian, parent, athlete, and maybe where you're from, just so we can get to know each other a little bit. All right, so as you all are logging in, if you can go ahead and put in the chat box who you are, what your role is, where you're from. And we can give a couple minutes for everybody to log in. All right, thank you all for joining. Just a couple more minutes just to get everybody to introduce themselves. I see someone's written in the Q&A. Someone said, Ronnie, I don't know if you can help with this. The chat is disabled. All right, let's see if we can get that fixed for you all. All right, I still don't see anything in the chat yet. Let's just give it another minute, see if we can get that worked. Okay, I see Ronnie has written in there. Is anyone else able to put in the chat now? All right, well, we're about 3 minutes in. So we'll let Ronnie continue working on that chat. Hopefully we can get that working. And we'll go ahead and get started on this. Okay. So feel free to post in that Q&A box. You can use that now to communicate until that chat's open. And we'll get started. So tonight's webinar is going to be on why and how to hydrate successfully. All right, so just a little bit about me. My name's Allison Catino. I'm a registered dietitian. So I am a former Division I soccer athlete. I do have my master's degree in exercise and nutrition science from Lipscomb University. And I'm currently a dietetics instructor at Tennessee Tech University. I'm also working towards my PhD at Tennessee Tech with my concentration in health education or health and wellness education. All right, so again, it looks like Ronnie has that chat open. So if you don't mind, if someone can let us know if it's working this time. Awesome, I see it's working. So if anybody wants to drop in where they're from, who they are, that would be wonderful. All right, we've got Courtney on there. Holly from Philadelphia. Hi, Holly. All right, great. So what we're going to learn today, I see a couple more. We've got University of Iowa, we've got Stephanie, we've got Sarah from Denver. So quite a few people. Welcome, everybody. So today what we're going to focus on is the importance of hydration, how to hydrate for optimal performance, what you should hydrate with, and then how to assess hydration status. All right, so the importance of hydration. So we do need to make sure that athletes have a proper balance of fluid and electrolytes. It helps regulate body temperature. It helps lubricate joints, moistens body tissues, helps transport some important nutrients, aids in digestion, and helps regulate blood pressure, which are all important things in the body. Some specific performance benefits of hydration are that it helps maintain normal muscle function. It reduces the risk of heat strokes or heat stress. It sustains work capacity, so helps the athlete keep working hard. It supports efficient blood pumping and may help reduce lactic acid buildup. So these are all things that are needed for athletes to perform the best that they can. It's known that even a slight amount of dehydration can negatively affect performance. So that can be as little as 1% of fluid loss in the body can have some negative effects on performance. So that means, say, for example, we have an 150-pound athlete, even a 1.5-pound loss of body weight can have some negative effects and start causing some dehydration going on. Okay, so now we're going to jump into how to hydrate for optimal performance. So first, we'll just talk about some general recommendations and tips. So we want to make sure that, whether we're a parent or a trainer, whoever we are, we're encouraging these athletes to consume fluids throughout the day, not just around workout times. So for example, if workout times are evening, we don't want just the athletes to drink before and after that practice or workout. We want them drinking it all day long. We also want to encourage them to drink on a schedule. So maybe even having to remind themselves. I know a big thing right now with athletes is some of those water bottles that every hour reminding you to drink something. So something like that could work, carrying a water bottle. And then also just a general recommendation is we want to drink a half of body weight in pounds and ounces. So for example, if an athlete weighs 150 pounds, they probably should be drinking about 75 ounces of water per day, plus more if they're exercising in hot, humid conditions. So that would be right now if we have any of those outdoor athletes training in July, they're probably going to need more than that because of the temperature. All right, so a little bit more specific guidelines now. We're going to talk about before, during, and after exercise. So before exercise, we recommend that 2 hours before, 16 to 20 ounces of fluids are consumed, and then 15 minutes before, 8 to 16 ounces. During exercise, the goal is going to be for the athlete to consume about 3 to 8 ounces every 15 to 20 minutes of activity. And then after exercise, it's recommended for about 16 to 24 ounces for every pound that was lost while that athlete was exercising. Okay, and just to think about it, put a little bit in reference, 1 gulp is about 1 ounce. So especially when we're talking about that 3 to 8 ounce recommendation during exercise, you might tell an athlete, well, make sure you have at least 3 to 8 gulps of water or fluids during exercise. So these are just some baseline recommendations. And of course, it's going to adjust for individual needs. So sweat rate might affect it. Some individuals sweat more than others. The type of activity, is it indoor, outdoor, gender, and even age. So some guidelines for proper hydration. So we can monitor fluid losses. So that would be weighing in before and after training, especially during hot weather and conditioning phases of the season. So right now we know it's hot, it's July, August is just around the corner. That might be something to consider to weigh before and after the exercise. So we know if weight is lost during exercise, it's going to be mostly fluid. That immediate weight loss is. So for each kilogram of weight loss during exercise, we're going to encourage that athlete to drink about a half a liter. And then if we're looking at it in pounds, for every pound that's lost, we're going to encourage about 2 cups of fluid to replenish that loss. So we do not want to restrict fluids before, during, or after the event. And then we also want to remember not to rely on thirst as an indicator. So thirst is not a precise gauge on immediate fluid needs. It's usually going to tell you a little bit too late that you need to have some fluids. So what should you hydrate with? So, this is something that comes up sometimes. So usually for exercise that lasts less than 60 minutes, water is going to be just fine to rehydrate with. For exercise longer than 60 minutes, or especially longer than 2 hours, we may want to consider drinking a sports beverage that does have electrolytes in it to replenish those as well. And then also even thinking about if activities happening outside in these hot temperatures, we're probably going to consider one of those sports beverages as well. Okay, so some ideas to increase fluid intake. So just to drink some more water. I know some athletes say, well, I just don't like water. I can't drink a lot of it. Well, there are some little tips and tricks to try to increase that. So we can add flavor. We can encourage athletes to infuse their water with fruits, herbs. So that could be anything with like orange, lemon, lime, strawberry, whatever fruit flavor they may like. And then some herbs that are popular to infuse into water would be like basil, mint, or ginger. Could also encourage them to fizz it up a little bit. So maybe adding some club soda or seltzer to the water to make it more appealing to the athlete. Again, encouraging that athlete to bring their own bottle, carry it with them throughout the day, whether they're in class, school, work, wherever they are, that they can have that with them and just kind of sip on it throughout the day. And then even remembering that you can eat your water. So there are some foods out there that have water content in them. So that could be like soups, broths. There's certain fruits, especially melons, that have a high water content in them. There's vegetables like celery, cucumber, tomatoes. They can all aid in hydration because they all have high water content. So usually about 80% of the fluids that we have each day are ingested, 80% ingested through water. And then about 20% of our daily fluid intake actually does come from these food items like soups, fruits, vegetables. So that's something to consider as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about assessing hydration status. So there's several ways we can do this. I know one popular easy thing to do to encourage athletes is just to check the color of their urine. So you can see on the chart on the right, so hydrated is going to be about 1 to 3, the more clear. And then when we're getting to that yellow, dark yellow, and then almost that yellowish brown looking urine, that's some severe dehydration. So we can easily encourage that for athletes to look at that. I know sometimes some dietitians or athletic trainers may put these charts, in the athletic training room, even put it in the bathroom stalls. So some of these athletes can see it right in front of them and remind themselves. Also, like we talked about a little bit earlier, we can encourage athletes to weigh themselves before and after exercise. Just to make sure they're replenishing, rehydrating properly afterwards. And then we also want to encourage them to consider how much water they've consumed in the past 24 hours. Okay, so think about it. Okay, did you not drink anything till about an hour before practice? So making sure that we're reminding them to drink consistently throughout the day. And then again, when we're thinking about how much weight they've lost at practice, about 1 pound lost is going to equate to drinking at least 16 ounces. So this is just a visual of some signs of dehydration and something to remind athletes of. So it could look like having a headache, lightheadedness, feeling dizzy, dry mouth, thirst, nausea. Again, with the urine output, if there's low urine output or dark urine output, fatigue, muscle cramps. So all of these are signs of dehydration occurring in that athlete. So now we're going to talk about a little bit of the role and purpose of electrolytes in hydration. Why do we need to talk about this? Because when we sweat, we don't just lose water, we lose electrolytes. So we've got to consider that as well. So electrolytes do have a positive or negative electrical charge. So proper amounts of electrolytes are needed to maintain proper balance in the body. So every fluid and cell in the body does contain electrolytes. So they're all throughout the body, and they help conduct some different functions in the body, like nerve impulses, contracting muscles, hydration, and regulating the body's pH levels. So some key electrolytes we're going to be thinking about are going to be sodium, magnesium, potassium, calcium, chloride, and bicarbonate. All right, so now we're going to talk about some types of electrolytes, foods versus supplements. So you can get electrolytes from foods. You can also get electrolytes from supplements. So they do come from what you eat and drink. Electrolyte balance can be maintained through a healthy, balanced diet, but imbalances can be caused by dehydration. So a rehydration solution like Gatorade, Powerade may be needed, especially if an athlete's exercising for 2 or more hours at a time, or they're exercising in extreme heat. I know, right? I'm in Tennessee right now. We've had some 100+ degree weather recently. I would consider that extreme heat, and someone may need an electrolyte drink. So this is a little list of some sources of electrolytes. So on the left-hand side, we're looking at food. So sodium, that's one of the main ones we're really going to be thinking about. So athletes can get this from table salt. So even encouraging athletes to salt their food. Cheese has sodium, pickled foods. Chloride, again, you can get that from table salt. Potassium, you get that from banana, avocado, sweet potatoes. Magnesium, seeds and nuts are good sources of magnesium. And then finally, we have calcium, which dairy products, green leafy vegetables, and fortified products are good sources of calcium. So if those are being incorporated into the diet, that means that athletes, they're getting those electrolytes they needed, and maybe they don't have to have as much as these supplements if they're already getting it in their diet. But supplements, again, may be needed. So we can use sports drinks. I don't know if anybody wants to put in the chat for me there, maybe some sports drinks you may use with athletes. So I know we've got Gatorade, Powerade, Pedialyte. So those are all some options. So if anyone does want to type in there what you use, I think that'd be great. So we can kind of see where we're at on that. There's also electrolyte tablets that can be used. There's powders, there's gels, there's some infused waters. So there's all sorts of products out there on the market now. I know Liquid IV is an example of a powder that can be used. All right. All right, so I see Maria says she uses Drip Drop. Okay, yes, that's a good one. That's a powder that's used a lot. All right, thanks for dropping that in there for us. So we've got Drip Drop, Liquid IV, Pedialyte, Gatorade, Powerade. Those are some very popular products. Okay, so now we have a couple case studies that we're going to go through together. So first scenario, and we're going to have a cross-country athlete running a 5K with a WBGT of 85. Okay, so for those of you who may not know, that WBGT is a wet bulb globe temperature. So this is basically just a measure of heat stress. So it takes into consideration temperature, humidity, and radiation. So 85, that's usually we're being a little bit more cautious there. It's pretty hot, it's high. We've got to consider the health, the safety of exercise. Usually exercise outdoors is going to be limited to 2 hours, and breaks are encouraged every 15 minutes. Okay, so just giving you a little background on that. So again, we've got to think about our recommendations. So our recommendations, we want to make sure that athletes drinking at least half of body weight in pounds and ounces of fluid, and then more if exercise is hot and humid, which it is in this condition. And then we want to make sure we're including something with salt. So that could be fluid or someone adding table salt to their food. We want to make sure they're getting water in at least 4 hours before, about 16 to 20 ounces, and then also about 8 to 12 ounces of water 10 to 15 minutes before the practice or the 5K. And then afterwards, we've got to consider for every pound of body weight loss, we want to make sure this athlete's getting at least 16 to 24 ounces of water in, and then consider an electrolyte drink and or a recovery beverage with protein and carbohydrate to replenish those muscles. Okay, and then another thing you can think about, soups, salted fruits or vegetables may also be used. I'd say after this hot, humid activity, they may not want a hot soup, but definitely those salted fruits or vegetables. Okay, so we have some application questions. So we have this cross-country athlete running a 5K. We know it's hot and humid out. So question 1, and I'll give y'all a couple minutes to look at this. So if the athlete weighs 2 pounds less after running this 5K, approximately how much fluid would they need to rehydrate? Okay, so I'll give y'all a minute if anybody wants to give their best guess as to what they think would be appropriate in this scenario. Yes, we've got 32 to 48 ounces exactly. So remember, our recommendation is about 16 to 24 ounces per pound loss. So we will double that since 2 pounds were lost. Great. All right, so the second one. So if the athlete weighs 135 pounds, how much water would they need to consume within the past 24 hours prior to running the 5K? All right, I'll give y'all a minute to see if anyone can give that one a go. Yes, 67.5. That's perfect. So usually we're doing about half an ounce per pound of body weight. So the 67.5 is a minimum, and then we might even encourage more of that because we know this is happening in a hot, humid environment. All right, so last one, what foods could the athlete eat following the 5K to help with rehydration? All right, so let's see if anybody wants to put in the chat maybe some foods that you would recommend to help this athlete to eat afterwards. All right, C1, we've got pretzels, banana, chocolate milk, nuts. Yes, those are all very good. So that banana is going to have some water content to it. It's also going to have some carbohydrates. That chocolate milk is going to have some protein and carbohydrates to help with the muscle recovery. So those are all great options. So any fruits, vegetables, and things like chocolate milk that has that protein and carbohydrate combination in it. Great. Awesome. You all did great on that one. So we've got one more. So we still have our general guidelines there, just to remind you. This time we do have a high school football athlete playing a night game with full pads, and a WBGT of 70. So this 70 means that this is no extreme temperatures, comfortable weather, normal activities may go on. So we're not worried about any extreme hot conditions at this point. Okay. So again, if we want to go through these questions. So question 1, if the football player weighs 7 pounds less after the football game, how much fluids would he need to consume afterwards? So I'll give y'all a second to figure that one out. Give a guess. All right, so we'll at least want a minimum of 14 cups of fluid. Remember, about 1 pound loss is going to be about at least 2 cups of fluid. Okay, so question 2, again, if the athlete weighs 220 pounds, how much water do they need to consume the 24 hours prior to the football game? So again, that rule of thumb is we do about 1/2 ounce per pound. So for this athlete who weighs 220, we'd recommend they drink about at least 110 ounces of fluid during that 24-hour period. And then question 3, so this one talks a little bit about during the football game. So if the football game lasted 3 hours, how much fluid would the player need during the game, assuming they're able to drink fluid every 15 to 20 minutes? All right, so can anybody put in the chat, what is that recommendation for how much fluid they should have every 15 to 20 minutes during the activity? Yes, 3 to 8 ounces. Perfect. Couple of y'all got that. Awesome. Yeah, so that's what we want to encourage. If it's easier to explain it to them, tell them to have at least 3 to 8 gulps of fluid. All right, so just some action steps in review. So we want to make sure that we're monitoring and managing the fluid intake of athletes throughout the day, whether you are one or you're working with athletes, and then make sure they're consuming an appropriate amount of fluids before, during, and after activity. Okay, and just a little quote here, just a reminder for these athletes and those of us working with athletes, if you persevere long enough, if you do the right things long enough, the right things will happen. Okay, so just reminding everyone, they're hydrating, doing these little things, doing the right steps to improve their performance, it'll happen, performance will improve. Okay, so just some for more information if anybody is curious or wants to know anything else about fluids and hydration, you can scan this QR code below, which will take us to our website and give you some more resources. But for now, for the last few minutes, does anybody have any questions? So we have a couple minutes left. So if anybody wants to put it in the Q&A or in the chat. Okay, I already see one. So Maria, you asked how much fluids do swimmers need? So again, for swimmers, what's going to be specific to that individual, but some of these general guidelines we just spoke about will be applicable to swimmers. So for example, whatever the weight that swimmer is, so if you've got a 150-pound swimmer, we know they probably need at least 75 ounces of water 24 hours before, and then continue with the guidelines that we talked about. But it's not going to be much different than other athletes, but we do have to remember they're not going to be in those hot extreme temperatures often outside. So we may not need tons extra like some of those may need like outdoor soccer players. Do we have any more questions? All right, I'll just give a couple seconds to see if anybody has any questions. All right, I don't see any more. Well, I do want to go ahead and show you this. So these are just some resources. So if you do have any more questions or you just want to look up some information, these are 5 good websites where you can find out some more information beyond what we have on our My Sports Dietitian page. All right, well, that is it for tonight. Thank you all for joining. Hope you all have a great rest of your night.